Hi, everybody, and thanks for being with me. A big question at the moment is why is it that we're continuing to support the war in Gaza? Why is it that we can't look at the number of deaths and be absolutely horrified by not just the fact that children are being being killed? That's horrible enough. Why is it that the Israeli government is continuing to bomb civilization out of oblivion in the way that they are? What's motivating them to do that? And I would argue that Netanyahu has decided that it is one way by which he can avoid being locked up himself, because there are some issues in terms of his bad behaviour, fraudulent behaviour, corrupt behaviour while in power. And we must remember that there are a lot of Israeli people who don't consider him a good leader. And what we're witnessing slowly is the turn of tide against him. We're eventually going to be able to see more and more countries saying enough is enough. And Australia was one of those recently where we chose to vote for a ceasefire through the United Nations. And that support is increasing. That is Netanyahu, who's under more and more pressure to dispense with this terrible, destructive war. Because the question we're now asking is not only there's 17,000 people that have been killed, we're also asking what's going to be left of Gaza at the end of that, and how would it be ever possible to form an appropriate government that will be able to look after, care for the people that are left in this destroyed country. So where does all of this go? Well, I am a bit tired of the right wing ignoring the number of deaths that have taken place, keep talking about Hamas as if somehow, as destructive and as terrible as the shootings were on the 7th of October, that they are responsible for whatever is happening in Gaza right at this time, because they're not. Who is responsible happens to be Israel in their indiscriminate bombing of that country and killing so many people. But I did come across a video from MSNBC yesterday actually, just in relation to this, and it was on the Joe Scarborough show, Morning Joe. Now, not a fan of Joe Scarborough, anything but a fan of Joe's, but he had Richard Haas on. Now, Richard was a foreign affairs expert, worked with many a government around their international involvements, and he came up with what I consider to be a really, really clear evaluation of what needs to take place. I'm just going to play that for you right now.
The sooner the better, but not necessarily soon, Joe. It's one of the incentives Bibi Netanyahu has to continue the war, is he continue to make the argument we can't change horses in the middle of it. So the real question...
But we're here. He's
trying to stay out of
because
jail.
of him, Richard.
I understand, Joe. The question is...
Doesn't make any sense.
But, Joe, what this is about is right now he's got a majority in the Israeli Knesset, in their parliament, and these people agree with him on one big thing. They do not want a Palestinian state. They want the settler movement to continue. They like the status quo. They couldn't care less about Gaza. They just want to fence it off. What they want to do is avoid a two-state solution. They want to continue to populate the West Bank. They do not want in any way to meet the Palestinians halfway. So what was interesting about yesterday is we ripped the Band-Aid off a little bit. The Biden administration and Netanyahu, essentially it's clear. We see things fundamentally different as to where this needs to go. The plan for Israel right now is a prolonged occupation. They have no alternative to Israel being in Gaza, open-ended, because they don't have anyone else to hand authority to run the place, to secure
Richard,
the place.
if the President of the United States asked you, what do we do? Do we keep funding Netanyahu to let him continue bombing indiscriminately without trying to figure out a less painful way? But how long do we prop up Netanyahu as he damages not only Israel's reputation across the globe, but damages ours?
I agree, and the Biden administration has to be really careful here because we're beginning to look like enablers. We begin to look feckless. We criticize Israel every day. We get ignored every day. What can we do? Let me suggest three things, and I'm comfortable with, particularly with one. One is in the UN. We can stop giving Israel pretty much an unconditional veto. Why isn't the United States introducing resolutions of its own that it believes in? Secondly, we've got to look at what kind of military support do we give Israel? Now, Israel faces real threats, Iran and other places, but do they necessarily need certain types of ordnance that, when used in Gaza, kills an awful lot of civilians? Maybe not. Third and most important, Joe, here's what I would do. I would right now have the United States not wait for Netanyahu. I would take the diplomatic initiative. 30-odd years ago, the United States under George Herbert Walker Bush, we convened the Madrid Peace Conference. I would do something like that now. I would have the United States working with the Arabs, working with the Europeans, maybe even bring in China. I would have an international effort right now to talk about how do we secure Gaza and how do we restart a diplomatic process in the Middle East. You'd invite Israel to it, but basically tell the Israelis, we are going to get going with diplomacy because this ain't working.
And I think that's probably one of the best responses I've had. Clear cut, it is defined, it tells us exactly what perhaps needs to be done, or at least offers some solutions to this incredibly difficult problem. Now, the response, though, that we get from other networks or right-wing networks particularly are distressing. And I'm about to play a clip from my favourite network, Sky News, where we can see the absurdity and the lack of understanding and depth that they have around this particular issue. And here is the clip.
The top story today, this is Australia voting with the United Nations to demand Israel agree to a ceasefire in Gaza. Michael Danby, clearly, this is Australia now siding with terrorist groups, with terrorist sympathisers, with useful idiots in the West who've been protesting on our streets in demanding that Israel retreats and allow...
What she's saying, though, is that one of those useful idiots in the West happens to now be the United States, given what we just heard from Richard Haas. So the tables are turning. Now, this woman is the worst interviewer on this planet. She's a shocker. But she is trying to advocate for the notion that if you're not going to support Israel and if you're going to criticise the way that they're bombing the daylights out of Gaza and the thousands of people who are being killed, then you're clearly anti-Semitic in a way. And I'm a bit over that notion that because you choose to stand up for humanitarianism as opposed to the destruction and murder of people, that somehow you're anti-Semitic, and that we must be, under all circumstances, siding with Israel, and that we can't take a different stance, which is the one that Richard Haas presented to us just a moment ago.
Allows the terror group to reinvigorate, to become emboldened, and to continue to attack Israel and kill Jews.
Penny Wong says that Israel has a right to defend itself until it does. Now we call for a ceasefire before the Hamas depraved, demented killers and rapists are put down, and the Israelis are expected to live with this. This is just making for the next war, for the next conflict. If those Hamas madmen are left there under the control, like the Houthis and Hezbollah of Iran, the whole world will be put in peril further down the road. This is just kicking the can, and I can't believe how we didn't vote with the Austrians, the Dutch, the UK, Ukraine, Germany, and we abandoned our American allies. I'm sure Biden's very happy with elbow over this.
Yeah.
Not.
Yeah. Look, I think the other point that I made earlier in
Stand by for Bridget.
the night, Bridget, is that actually this is part of Hamas's war strategy. It uses civilians as human shields so that it can get, this condemnation of Israel from the international community. So this UN vote is playing into Hamas's hands, and actually calling for a ceasefire is advancing Hamas's war strategy.
I don't understand why it isn't we can't argue that causing a ceasefire may save thousands and thousands of lives. Like, why can't that be just presented as an argument here? Why is it that these morons just cannot see that the savings of lives is more important than anything else? Or are they arguing that sacrificing thousands, tens of thousands of people is okay because a small group of people, Hamas, may re-emerge and may commit another terrorist attack? Well, one of the arguments here actually was that Netanyahu knew that there was likely to be an attack. He chose not to do anything. And then he chose, once it happened, not to respond for 8 hours. Now, there are some arguments, true or not, I do not know, that the knowledge that the IDF had in relation to all of this was significant, and for whatever reason they chose not to acknowledge it, not to do anything. They have one of the best intelligence forces in the world, yet this plan, for whatever reason, was able to take place, planned months and months before it actually happened, and they didn't know about it. I find that a little bit difficult to believe. Don't want to delve into conspiracy theories, but on the other hand, why would we argue that it's okay for thousands and thousands of people to be indiscriminately killed?
Absolutely.
And of course, Bridget has all the answers.
Shari, I mean, in a time of war, governments have to hold their nerve. It is not the time to try and be all things to all people. And the contradictory and confusing messaging out of this government continues. You've got to hold your nerve. We've got Josh Burns, who's actually on the ground in Israel because the Foreign Affairs Minister and the Prime Minister refuses to go, saying no ceasefire. That is what the Labor MP on the ground in Israel is saying right now, while simultaneously you've got ministers like Ed Husic and Annika Wells saying exactly the opposite. We need a clear message from this government, and you cannot have Hamas being able to rearm, rebuild, reorganise, so it continue its desire to exterminate the Jewish population from the Middle East. It's incredible.
No, but it's okay. It appears, God, but it seems to be okay for the Israels, and I'm not saying Jews here. It's not about the Jewish people, but it does seem to be okay for the Israel government to destroy Palestinians because that is their aim. So the Zionists would be extremely happy with all of this, that eventually Israel is going to destroy all Palestinians. Now, what does that mean? Does that mean that you just wipe everybody out, that you just kill everybody who is a Palestinian? It's in Gaza now. It'll eventually be in the West Bank. The settlers will just take over. So what's going to be the outcome unless somebody somewhere says it's got to stop? And the idea that there be a group of people, an organisation which covers many, many countries, those interested in the Middle East, America, UK, and even China, as Richard Huss suggested, why isn't it they can't form a group that decides on or helps to decide on how the Palestinians can become an independent nation? Because it's the only way it will be resolved. Israel at the moment is saying that that's not on the cards. That's not what they want. That's not what they've ever wanted. And the Palestinians, all they want to do is live in peace. Let me know what you think about this, and please remember to subscribe to my channel and ring the bell. But we need to do something, and we need to have a voice so that we can stand up for all those innocent people who've not only died, but who will die in the future unless countries make a stand against and particularly stop funding Israel. And that's an issue I think we need to take up with the Australian government, that we stop providing whatever material aid we do provide to Israel, that we need to cease doing that to let them know that their behaviour is unacceptable. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. In the meantime, take care, look after yourselves, and more importantly, be safe.